I'm so excited to be sharing the book of the month with you today. What I'll be doing today is walking you through some key chapters and my takeaways. If you're someone who has struggled with your mental health and you're looking for a book that helps you feel seen, heard and understood and has some practical tools in it, I really recommend this. I initially listened to this book as an audiobook, and as Michelle is from rural Wales, it had such a soothing tone to it. There's something about people telling me their own stories in their own voice that I really enjoy, whether that's a biography or a book like this. In the book, Michelle really highlights the reality of living with a mental health condition, the reality of feeling like we need to be doing it all before we turn 30, and the stark reality that can hit us. She talks about trying to relocate from Wales to London and having to press pause on her career because of her mental health. Michelle was a writer and was made for the creative industry, and she made international headlines when her blog about being body shamed went viral. Since then, she writes in a whole host of publications around feminism, body issues and mental illness. So let's get started. I particularly loved this one extract of what anxiety meant for her. This is something that I ask a lot of clients because it's different for everyone. Michelle wrote, "Anxiety isn't the same as feeling nervous before a job interview. It's scanning every room you walk into for potential threats. It's knowing that you'll fail that exam despite you achieving consistently high marks. It's being close to tears all day because you were 10 minutes late for work and you're racked with guilt and self-loathing. It's finding a tiny blemish on your breast and lying awake, weeping silently so as not to wake your partner, convinced that you have cancer, and playing the moment when you have to tell your family over and over in your mind. It's second and third and fourth guessing every single decision you make every single day." Michelle goes on to tell us the different moments of difficulty that she faced before seeking professional support. Michelle also has a chapter called My Shit Decade. One of the key takeaways I got from this chapter is the pressure that we put on ourselves. I really feel like we have to do everything before we turn 30. And then before we turn 40. The social assumption is that we will be paired up with our one true soulmate by the age of 30 and hurry to spawn. The other is that once you settle down and have babies, your time for exploring and learning is over. And so in the 12 years between 18 and 30, you must travel the world, choose an area of it that you want to live in for the rest of your life, learn everything you want to learn, land your dream job, find the one who you'll happily stick with until you're dead. All this while nursing the hangover from the perpetual partying, which you'll have to find time to document on social media so that all other 18 to 30s know that you're on course. Michelle goes on to explore the challenges of this, and she finishes with, "The days are long, but the years are short. If you spend your youth aiming to do things you love and that are important to you, baking, writing, gigging, competitive spearfishing, whatever, you'll be happier. And that, I think, is the true measure of success." She goes on to write a list of top 10 things that make her happy. Now, these two things felt really important to me. The first being the measure of success. What do we define our personal measure of success to be? This is really important when we're feeling lost, or we're comparing ourselves to other people, or we're feeling like we're not quite hitting the mark of our imaginary timeline. If we can define what our measure of success is, then we will feel better about being on track and living out our life purpose. Moving on to her top 10 list of things that make her happy, this is a great way to remind yourself of all of the things that you can do when you're struggling. Having that written down in a notebook or on the Notes app on your phone can be a brilliant reminder to reconnect with the things that make you, you. In the book, Michelle shares with us the challenges of being at work with poor mental health. She chooses to move from Wales to London and gets a job which is really challenging for her mental health. She eventually decides to leave that job and get a job as a barista, whilst also spending time writing. I've worked in HR for almost 10 years, and alongside that I've had a career as a counsellor. So maybe I'm biased, but I believe the connection between mental health and work is incredibly important. In this chapter, Michelle says, "My stint in that company was the most agonising and miserable period of my life. I ate nothing but junk. I slept badly. I never relaxed, was never able to relax. I was desperate to do well and desperate for the 'you did good, kid' hand on my shoulder, and it was killing me. I ignored the symptoms of my depression for months. Looking back, I can recognise a pattern of upheaval, a breadcrumbs trail of cortisol-drenched anxiety that began around 8 months before my nuclear fallout of a breakdown. Alongside starting this new job, the following events had occurred. My dad had a minor stroke, from which he fully recovered almost immediately, but it had an immeasurable impact on our family. I moved house. I moved in with a partner for the first time. I worked another season at the Edinburgh Fringe. Each of these major life-altering events happened weeks apart, with no recovery in between. In less than a year, I was a wreck. I was exhausted. I cried at everything. This is a similar story that I hear with clients. They may express that they have no idea why they're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or exhausted. And as we go through the different areas of their life, it becomes clear that they are managing a lot. As humans, we are only able to manage so much. If we saw someone else managing what we are managing, we would likely show some compassion. We would likely think, my goodness, how are they doing that? And yet, for some reason, when it's us, we berate ourselves. We say that we're not strong enough. We say that we should be able to do better. What's the difference? And so in therapy, we sometimes talk about our cup being full. If you imagine an empty cup and fill it with some water to represent your baseline. Maybe you grew up in a household that was difficult. Maybe you have some unresolved trauma. Or maybe you have simply learned that anxiety is a way of coping. And therefore your cup is already filled with a certain level of water. As we add on these different events, so for Michelle, her dad having a stroke would have added in a certain amount of water. Working at the Fringe Festival would have added in another certain amount of water. And then whatever came next may be the thing that made that cup overflow into the breakdown that she talks about. We only have so much space in our cups. And so learning to recognise how full our cup is a really important skill when we're thinking about supporting our mental health. Another reason that I love Michelle's book is because she gives very practical advice. For many people who are struggling with mental health, it directly impacts their work. If you're completely overwhelmed with your emotional well-being, coming to work and needing to concentrate and focus can literally be the straw that broke the camel's back. Michelle mentions that, according to the charity Mind, 1 in 5 people have phoned in sick due to stress. But over 90% gave their employers a different reason for their absence, like a headache or a stomach upset. And of course, this is an option for you. You don't have to disclose your mental health status to anyone. But I do believe that the pressure of keeping it secret can exacerbate your symptoms. The Equality Act exists to protect you from discrimination in the workplace, and you have every right to request support when you need it. In fact, your employer is legally obliged to make reasonable adjustments to accommodate your needs. Again, as someone who has worked in HR as well as a counsellor, I feel very lucky to have some insight into this situation. And Michelle is absolutely right. As an employee, you have certain rights. You should never be discriminated against because of your mental health. And so if you're struggling with your mental health, it's important that you go to the doctor and get a diagnosis. It's important to do that so that you can get the support that you need, whether that is medication or is counselling. And it is also important in terms of being able to communicate to your employer what support you need from them. Your employer will want to consider what reasonable adjustments they can make to support you in coming to work. That might look like reduced working week. It might look like commuting not in the rush hour. It might look like less responsibilities. There is support out there if you need it. I love that she has a section in her book about who to follow on social media. She talks about cleaning out your feed and filling it with the things that make you feel good. I think we're all guilty of following people who we find inspirational, and yet they don't make us feel good about ourselves. She brings the comparison that this isn't like looking through a 200-page glossy magazine where we have no control over who it is that we are seeing. Our Instagram feed is completely curated by us, and so we can own that. She has some brilliant recommendations of people that she follows. That includes powerful women, people that make her laugh, people that have absolutely nothing to do with mental health, and food accounts. Michelle also kindly gives us a chronology of her relationship with her body. As she was a child, Michelle had no idea that she was considered fat until a school friend had told her. Since then, she had tried to distance herself and pretend that she didn't really have a body. When the Titanic came out in 1997, she was just 12. While she hadn't watched the film, she'd seen the posters and Kate Winslet on TV. She was in awe of her beautiful womanly body. And she says, she's extremely pretty and she has bosoms and belly and a bum. She looks like some of the girls in sixth form, the girls I want to look like when I grow up. As she notices her pictures in the paper, she starts to pay attention to what is being written about her. I read the way that her body is judged and scrutinised in tones that swing between common sense, she looks like a woman, a normal, healthy human woman, and deep distrust. One article debates whether Kate's dress was hot or not. This is the first time I have interpreted curves as negative. Kate Winslet seems to be on the receiving end of a grown-up version of the taunts I receive at school. I remember looking at the pictures of her after reading those critical words at 12 years old and thinking, actually, maybe they're right. Maybe she shouldn't have worn that. She is a bit voluptuous, another word I had learnt that week. She's really pretty, but if she lost weight, then she'd be perfect. She'd look like a real star. My child's mind is weighing and measuring Kate Winslet with the assistance of the media's endless comparisons to her thinner contemporaries. And I remember thinking, if she's fat, what hope do I have? And this is at just 12, and something that many other girls watching this might recognise. Unfortunately, the media that we consume, not even with thought, that is all around us, colours our vision of what we see beautiful as, and colours our vision of how we perceive ourselves. It's truly sad to think of the 12-year-old Michelle sitting there and seeing someone that she thought was so beautiful suddenly not be, and relaying that to herself and her own body. Along with the other side of our body, i.e. not just the way that it looks but the way that it functions, Michelle tells a number of stories from her online community that link the very reality of not being physically healthy to not being mentally healthy. I felt the story from Greg was really poignant. I've always been kind of low energy and gloomy. I struggled with low moods a lot. By the time I was in my early 30s, it was really bad. At first, I thought it was just middle-aged and grumpy. My moods were fluctuating and my whole attitude to myself and the world was gradually changing because I wasn't thinking right. I had really, really bad paranoia. I was hypervigilant, always looking around, on alert for a threat. I thought I was going mad. My short-term memory was shot. My hands would stop working. I dropped things all the time. All these worrying symptoms put a bigger pressure on my mental health. My 5-year relationship ended because I was so paranoid and anxious all the time. I had become a different person. People invited me out and I wouldn't go, and eventually they stopped asking. I used to love meeting loads of different people. So then I moved out and lived on my own, which made it worse because I was isolated, unwell and desperate. I was incoherent. I was slurring my words. It felt like I'd lost 100 IQ points. I was angry for no reason. I'd just wake up furious. Eventually it got so bad that I went to my GP because it felt like I was dying. When I was in the waiting room, I saw a poster about diabetes in children, and I had every single symptom. The GP agreed to do a quick blood test. A healthy blood sugar level is under 7 milligrams. Mine was 34. They rushed me to hospital. It was really scary. I had a drip in each arm for days while they reset all my mineral levels. The system that controls your hormones and your energy is linked. So if you don't have enough glucose, everything starts going wrong. And that includes your brain chemistry, low serotonin, mood swings, anxiety. The link between blood sugar and low mood is massive and not really talked about. I'd alienated everyone by being a grumpy, horrible bastard. And finally, moving on to dating and mental health. Anyone who has tried dating while struggling with their mental health will understand the very challenges of this. And Michelle has a whole host of tips to support you through this, including some text scripts for when you've met someone who you're not really interested in and how you can reject them nicely. She also talks about the reality of how easy it is to become involved with someone who is emotionally abusive when we are struggling with our own mental health. And again, she shares with us some stories from her community, which are incredibly helpful in understanding the different experiences of dating with poor mental health. All in all, I think this book is packed with quality. I wanted to share the key topics with you to see if this was something that you would be interested in getting stuck into. I hope it's helped.